All right. Crystal, do you want me to present from your screen or you want to swap?
I can stop share if you want to share.
Okay, perfect. Hi, everyone. It's lovely to see you. I love all of the fall things. I couldn't like every one of them, but I tried. Um, I am really excited to kind of share some thoughts about contextually inappropriate behavior during today's didactic. Please jump in and ask questions as we go. I will try my best to keep an eye on the chat, but I'm sure Crystal and Stephen and the team will also be looking at it. So please let me know if there are specific questions or scenarios that you want to share. So the big goal of our topic today is really to understand this concept of contextually inappropriate behaviors, and think about how we respond to them as well as how do we prevent them from occurring. So as we kind of embark on this discussion related to behavior, I wanted to center us with a quote. And if you've been to a BAS training on function-based thinking, you have most likely seen this image. I'm going to give you a moment to read it. So this is an inspirational quote to me. I did a little bit of digging around to learn who Mona Delahooke is. And Mona Delahooke doesn't just lead a great Instagram account. She also has a series of books all related to understanding behavior deeply and really looking at how do we approach behavior in a way that is human-centered and understanding. And it's not just thinking about behavior as a outcome, but really trying to see the situations that surround behavior. And I feel like at the Behavior Alliance, that's part of how we view behavior as well. And when we're talking about this term, contextually inappropriate behavior, it's a rather new term for us, right? Like this is something that when I was in graduate school, we were using other terms. We were using challenging behavior, or we were using the term problem behavior or target behavior. But in the last couple of years, the field has shifted to this new term of contextually inappropriate behavior. And we're shifting to understand that behavior occurs in a context. So I saw somebody put in the chat, fall and football go together. So if we're thinking about a student playing football, they're going to be chasing somebody. They might be tackling them, or they might be putting their hands on somebody. So this is all on the football field, right? Or it is during PE. But if chasing and tackling and touching occur outside of football or outside of PE, that becomes contextually inappropriate. So all behavior is based off of the context in which it occurs. And so I think that this is so important for us to recognize because there's situations as a parent, I want my kids to yell. But I don't want them to yell when they are in a classroom. But I want them to be able to use those skills like yelling or running when they need to for safety purposes. So all behavior is appropriate or inappropriate based off of the context. So we're moving away from that term problem behavior, challenging behavior, because of the stigmas associated with it. And we're really starting to think about behavior being appropriate and consistent with those situational expectations. And so you all have been working on your norms for your buildings. And so this is a really nice way to think about what behaviors are contextually inappropriate in the bathroom versus outside of the bathroom or in different school settings. So the setting matters to the behavior. And so I have this question for you that you could respond in the chat. Why is it more effective to refer to certain actions as contextually inappropriate rather than that problem behavior term? What do you think? Just take a moment to process and you could drop some notes in the chat. Yeah, thank you. It validates that behaviors may be acceptable in certain places, makes it more objective. Yeah, it makes you consider the situation. Thanks, Erin. Yeah, these are great responses. Thank you, Karen. It focuses on the behavior, not the person. It changes how we think about supports. So, as a parent, I would be kind of caught off guard if a teacher was telling me that my own child was engaging in problem behavior. But if they talk about it in this more positive term, as Sarah said, it really honors the child and it helps us think about behavior, not the individual. It's the behavior in that context. And so I really appreciate you all kind of sharing that reflection because as we think about behavior, we're really trying to think about our supports being proactive, understanding that different behaviors occur in different situations and focus on teaching skills. And then we're going to link those long-term interventions to the function of a behavior. If you haven't already, I highly recommend checking this resource from the PBIS Technical Assistance Center, where it was originally in 2016, it came out as the Supporting and Responding to Behavior, and now they've updated it and it's supporting and responding to students' social, emotional, and behavioral needs. And they actually talk a lot about in the beginning of that handbook on contextually inappropriate behavior. So after the didactic today, you can grab this resource and on page 9, they actually go through their definition of contextually inappropriate behaviors. And it matches ours, no surprise there. But one of the pieces that I wanted to recognize here is that the guide really describes contextually inappropriate behaviors as errors. And if we think about contextually inappropriate behaviors, the same way we think about an academic skill deficit or an academic error, then we think about it as instructional rather than reactive or exclusionary. So really seeing it as an error, like, oh my goodness, we need to teach this behavior so that it occurs in the right context rather than punish the behavior. Because if we're punishing or we're suspending, that's not actually giving an opportunity for a student to get access to how an opportunity to learn the behavior. So let me switch over. So all of that to say, one of the big things that that guide also hits on page 20 is that identifying the context and the function of the behavior is really important. And I know that the function-based thinking has been something that has been integrated into your tier 1 development. And so really thinking about why the behavior is occurring in that context can really help us develop function-based behavior supports. And while developing them, we really want to think about that why it's occurring and all of these different things that could be influencing behavior. So maybe it's different factors such as social or pro-social, emotional, cognitive, biological, all of those things really influence behavior, but they also influence our definitions of behavior. And so when we're thinking about behavior, we do really want to recognize why the behavior occurs and then the situations that could be invisible to us and not present that impacts the context. And so we're always thinking about the ABC model, the antecedent, behavior, and consequences. With that focus on that antecedent really helps us see when the behavior occurs, it's a situation or it's event that precedes behavior, and then that consequence at the back end, which helps us kind of think about, okay, so if this contextually inappropriate behavior occurred, what did the student get access to or what did they avoid? So what was provided or what was removed? And then we're thinking about that behavior, and that ABC model really helps us see why that behavior happens. The antecedents are signaling something, and the consequences let the student know that a given behavior will result in something reinforcing, whether it's that reinforcement of attention, or maybe it's that reinforcement of getting out of something. So all of those things help us figure out the function of a behavior. So as we shift terminology, and we start to really think about approaching behavior differently, how does this impact your understanding and approach to behavior? So I will let you respond in the chat. Oh, Stephen, thank you so much for dropping that link in the chat. So how does this shift in terminology away from the problem behavior terminology really help us shift to the contextually inappropriate behavior and thinking about those ABCs? I love that. So how can I reteach the appropriate behavior? It gives us agency instead of jumping to those punitive consequences. I'm jumping all around in how I just read those comments. Thanks, James, for jumping in. It forces us to consider all of the events surrounding behavior. James, I'm gonna like that with my blue heart because that's it. We're thinking about what's happening before the behavior occurs and what happens after. Thank you, Sunshine, for sharing that proactive versus reactive. Yeah, so all of those pieces are really important when we think about behavior. And in the guide, they actually have a few strategies that I wanted to highlight pretty briefly. They're on page 20. And one of the ways that we can encourage contextually appropriate behaviors is to teach explicitly. That's exactly what James threw in the chat earlier. But we can celebrate and acknowledge and reinforce behavioral skills. And there's a number of different ways we can do it, whether it's the good behavior game, CW Fit, token economies. Those are just a few simple strategies to encourage contextually appropriate behavior. The other way is really building connections with families, and those intentional communications back and forth help us understand what's going on in the context in which behavior occurs and some of those situations that we might not see, those invisible things that kids bring in their backpacks, really having intentional, proactive communication. As a special ed teacher, I used to have my little clipboard where I would make sure I had an intentional, proactive communication home every month for every student on my caseload. And it was in a variety of different modalities. Oftentimes it was based off of what the parents or caregivers preferred. So that's one way to encourage positive behaviors. But when we have challenging behavior, contextually inappropriate behaviors occurring, we can respond to them in a few different ways. And so one of the ways is we're thinking about, okay, this is a teachable moment. We can be respectful, we can be supportive, and we can use different types of reinforcement. We can acknowledge when the appropriate behavior goes on, and we could use some non-contingent reinforcement, differential reinforcement, or self-management. And all of those strategies are mapped out in that PBIS user guide. Differential reinforcement really gets at the function of a behavior. So when thinking about and contextually inappropriate behavior, if the behavior is occurring, we can use differential reinforcement, which is the acknowledgement of the contextually appropriate behavior. And then it's an ignoring or a gentle redirection of the contextually inappropriate behavior. Pretty simple. You respond to the behavior you wish to see, redirect or ignore the behavior that is contextually inappropriate. The big thing to recognize is that consequences are any response that happen after a behavior occurs, and it typically doesn't change behavior overnight. So a consequence could be a positive thing, such as that phone call home for doing really well, or it could be a response to a contextually inappropriate behavior, such as having the student stay a little bit later and finish up their work that they missed. But typically, regardless of the consequence, whether it is to reinforce a desirable behavior or to respond to a contextually inappropriate behavior, it doesn't happen overnight. What happens overnight is a plan is made and we need to be consistent. And so having consistency at the end of the day is what matters, because students want to know what their what is going to either get them access to something, whether it's some recognition or get them out of something. And what I've found over the years is that we can't do this alone. And so working together within your school-wide teams to really have a strategy to prevent or respond to contextually inappropriate behavior for an individual student takes a team. And so that team might be a special educator and a general educator. It might be the general ed teacher and school administrators, inviting the family to be a part of that team, collaborating with them, ensuring student input and voice, like why is the behavior going on? Simply asking a student why makes a big difference and helps you understand really what is going on. And then developing a strategy to address the behavior and then monitoring whether or not it's effective. At the end of the day, though, it's really important to think about how we can go back to that inspiration of shifting away from just trying to stop a contextually inappropriate behavior to really trying to understand it and to promote a deep understanding of the child, also thinking about like, how can I teach them? Where is this teachable moment? Why is this behavior going on in this context? And what can we do about it? As I wrap up, I have a few resources for you. The first is from the IRIS Center. The IRIS Center just got reauthorized for additional funding, and they're producing a number of new modules. This module came out pretty recently, and I highly recommend it. One of my colleagues at Vanderbilt is the developer of the module, and I really like how individualized the module is for thinking about students with disabilities, but also thinking about it for students without disabilities. And it's just really understanding student behavior. So I highly recommend that module. The other modules are out of the Affirm Center from the UNC Chapel Hill. And there are a number of modules that they have that are related to contextually inappropriate behaviors. So going back to the ABC models, you could check out the antecedent-based interventions, differential reinforcement if you want to learn more about that, response interruption and redirection self-management are just a few, and I have antecedent-based interventions on there twice. And finally, to close us out, I wanted to highlight the Behavior Alliances modules that we have available on campus. The group contingency one is a great way to encourage positive behaviors as well as function-based thinking, just kind of digging back into that and thinking about why behaviors occur. All right. How'd I do for time?